I think a university should be a space where all views are considered, just like this, but then critiqued and critically debated. So it is important that we kind of hear a variety of views, but that then it's within a space where those views can be robustly critiqued. So would I have an issue with, for example, a far-right racist organization coming to talk to you? I probably wouldn't do it in a module like this. I might want to set up a special event, but I would also make sure that there are people who will robustly take that to pieces, me being one of them. So it's about kind of presenting those views, but then presenting the counter view. What I wouldn't think would be a wise idea would be just to allow that person to come in and speak to people without the opportunity for that to be challenged and presented in a way as if that is the single and only truth. So I think those debates and discussions, and it's weird how politics kind of seizes this thing, because the right wing factions of politics at the moment are really kind of, they would agree with everything I've just said there. They would say they agree with it, but I wouldn't necessarily identify myself as having particularly right-wing politics. So it's complex. Again, it's a really complicated idea about how certain ideas get occupied by particular political thinking. So yeah, that's my kind of current position. I see the dangers of, as I said, allowing all views to be heard without, and in a particular view to be heard, but it needs to be really specific. There's some right-wing hate person went and spoke to a group of students in America, and they all just stood up and walked out en masse in protest. I thought that was an excellent. So he was invited, but then they expressed their opinions towards him. It was kind of interesting. Just gone 10 o'clock and asked me a question today. It's a hard one for me to answer. I mean, what I would say is I don't actually think, the label cancel culture is a particularly helpful one, actually. I think the term itself has been created and is politicized. If the question is, what do I think about robust debate being had within particular spaces, which is kind of what I was answering to, then I think that would still stay the same. But I think it's just, I think that the term of it is really interesting. It's more often the argument is that those views should be expressed so that then they can be rebuffed and have that kind of discussion. It sort of goes back to that idea about me. Would I rather work with a racist person who is expressing racism, or someone who just shuts up and doesn't say anything about it? You know, what do you do about that? It's a bit like, you know, if you have a splinter in your finger, do you just kind of let it stay there and fester until your finger drops off? Or do you do the uncomfortable job of pulling it out? And I think the issue is that we kind of try and pull it out, but we end up chopping the finger off and doing it because the way we deal with these things are often inelegant and ineffective. So that's why I said within the right context, I think by cancelling someone, you are entering into the debate, right? You're saying their views are wrong and I'm not going to have any part of that. And they're not going to come and express those views to my group of people because I think they're wrong. So that also then feeds into the debate. So I have quite a lot of sympathy with the position that you've expressed as well. But the problem is, as I said, we're just not very good at pulling the splinter out. We go, oh yeah, it needs to be done. Well, we'll just do it and blood's all up the wall and you think, oh, how do I stop the bleeding? And then just leave it and pretend that there was no splinter in there in the first place. That's what typically happens because we're not good at having the debate. So then you leaves the question, would it have just been better to have left the splinter in there in the first place? Because we've made such a hash of trying to get the splinter out, I think is where you kind of go along with that analogy, really. So yeah, my argument has flaws in it. I'm aware of that. I kind of want to spend the rest of the morning talking about that now. Again, this whole issue around the inelegant challenge of stuff. How do we actually deal with these things when they come up? And of course, what we need to include here is power in terms of who's saying these things. Different people have different power and different platforms. So when we're looking at this kind of thing of no platforming, which, as I said, is a problematic term, some people have a platform and others don't. And so we need to kind of interrogate that as well. There are certain voices and particular groups are silenced and don't have a platform. So in a sense, no platforming happens anyway, because oppressed groups often don't have the same power and privilege that others do to have those words spoken. So maybe our job is to rebalance that. And of course, then those with a particular political view don't like that, because they're like, oh, wait a second, we used to be the oppressor and now you're telling us we can't. Oh, that's really oppressive of you for telling us we can't oppress people, is the argument often. Oh, that's not fair.